and gentlemen, and everybody in between, welcome once again to the SYN Shop podcast. I'm, of course, the Mighty Pong.
And I'm Crux.
And on tonight's show, we have our returning champion, Muffins. He's going to be talking to us a little bit about disaster planning. We had him on last May, all the way back in episode 17. And he did a awesome talk about disaster planning. And so we're going to kind of check up on him, see how the last year has gone for him, for instance. But before we go there, first an announcement on the shop. So the SYN Shop is a maker hackerspace located in Las Vegas, Nevada. We offer tools and equipment that you can use to make pretty much whatever you can think of. Now, we're currently closed for renovation, so you're going to have to wait a little bit to come check out the shop. But our members are currently working just as hard as they can to get the shop back in action as soon as possible. Now, if you're in the Las Vegas area and you'd like to help, join our Discord and check out the shop build-out channel to see what you can do to help get the shop back in action. Now, to join our Discord, you can hit up synshop.org/Discord to find the latest information. And to make sure that you're notified of our future events, including virtual ones just like this, you can join us at meetup.com/Synshop. And with that, I'd like to introduce Muffins. Welcome back.
Thank you. Hey, it's great to be back.
Awesome. So just to give everybody, to kind of reintroduce you to everybody, because it's been since, I think, the beginning of May that we last had you on. And so how long have you been going to the shop?
Oh, gosh, 2016 is when I started. And I haven't been there for a little over a year now. I think the last time I showed up was the 27th of January. Met up with our buddy Jed. And I've been there. I came originally because of gray noise and because I love maker spaces. And then I kind of stuck around until I disappeared for a year. But I'm still here. I'm still a member, still vetted, all that good stuff.
Awesome. So now, give us a little bit about your background. Like, what makes a average SYN Shop member an expert on disaster planning?
Well, for me, it goes back 40 years when I took some correspondence courses from FEMA. And I said, hey, this is pretty cool. I got my first aid training, all that sort of good stuff. But I took these correspondence courses on disaster planning. And they were pretty good. And so ever since then, I've kind of maintained them. But, my background, I'm a former Marine. I spent, time in the entertainment industry, which is fun. And generally, though they don't have a lot of disasters, they're kind of, reactive. And maybe that's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
And then I spent quite a few years over in the Middle East after the invasion, and doing a lot of force protection, command and control. So when you're in that type of environment, the military type of environment, not in the military, just as, and slimy, dirty contractor, you pick up these techniques just because you get the visibility, situational awareness of, hey, bad things can happen. Like when I was driving through Baghdad back in 2004, going down Route Irish, which is basically their highway from the international airport to the green zone. And I was listening to the local talk radio in Arabic, and we were in a traffic jam. And I was thinking, this is like LA. It felt like LA. It was warm like LA, traffic like LA. And I'm thinking, this could happen anywhere. And so all of that background kind of reinforced, hey, maybe we should have a plan to deal with things. And incidents in my life really kind of built this need, and primarily because I don't react well to change. I kind of freeze up. So by having these plans, it helps me deal with it and make good decisions.
Oh, definitely. Okay, I gotta put a pin in that and come back to that later, because that's really interesting. That again, putting a pin in it. Anyway, so so I got it. It's interesting that you say that, because in a way that kind of makes the abnormal normal.
Yeah,
because you're like, I have a plan for this, so I can go ahead and deal with it.
Yeah, well, it I have 75 plans that are in my library, and I probably will put 74 in, take one out, because the disaster plan that we did for the epidemic worked perfectly, except it exceeded its time. There's time limits on these plans, and there's only a 1 year duration for a disaster in my plans. And so I didn't plan beyond a year, and I'm sitting here going, I guess I have to suspend the plan because the checklist, I laid out the time frames, and even though all those things are there, I don't want to redeclare a disaster. That's crazy.
Yeah.
The world has changed. So I'm struggling, not really struggling, but I'm kind of just going, how can I adapt to the fact that this new normal, which is starting to arrive, and we can kind of get a vision on where last May we were kind of like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
It's a little more clear now that maybe this is a real transition, like we saw maybe from the 70s to the 80s, or from the 50s to the 60s, where we went through big cultural changes, because this has had a huge impact on us. Every one of us is very different than we were a year ago at this point.
Wow. So in the line of background, just because, the people watching us now and that'll watch us tomorrow on YouTube might not be aware of this, the reason that we had Muffins on the first time, or the reason I was like, oh, we got to bring him on, is because it took us until, here in Vegas, it took us until, what was that? I guess end of March or something like that they shut down everything before. Before we were taking it seriously, before we were like, oh, no, we can't be open. We got to do this, but meanwhile, Muffins was already doing this in what, January?
Well, the 27th is when we declared the disaster
of January.
Yeah, the 27th of January. And I wandered down to the shop. I had been talking with one of our members, and hey, because I restore vintage computers for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had a couple vintage computers, some old ThinkPads, and some really cool Acer stuff from the mid 2000 timeframe. So, which I've restored them all. It was really fun.
Plenty of free time.
And we had declared the disaster, and so I showed up at the shop with, the protective glass, surgery style, glasses. I had gloves and a mask, which I had pulled out of my disastered kit because we had declared the disaster. And I went down there because it was still pretty early in the time. We had maybe 4,000 deaths worldwide at that point. But I still went down there, and the guy I was working with, he's like, that's cool, whatever, do your thing. So he wasn't really impacted, but there was a class actually running at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what it was about, but there was a lot of people who were there to learn about, soldering, I think it was, whatever there was Tuesday classes we used to run. I can't remember what it was, but there was a lot of people in there who were very, normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I come rolling in there with the big surgery glasses, masked up. And back then that was like, they looked at me with googly eyes, and they're like, what the heck? And then, of course,
at that point, you really kind of owe it to yourself and others to be like, does anybody have like a lot of hydrochloric acid and a really big tub? No, just curious, hypothetically.
Well, if I had that humor on demand, I definitely wouldn't be the person I am.
Right.
So.
Just close the doors. Like, do not go out there.
Don't go out there. Just trust
you don't want to look. Don't look in my trunk.
If you do go out there, you may as well just jump in the tub, because.
Well, actually, when I think about it, because I was talking about, hey, can I go pick up the stuff? Yeah, it's around back. And I said, I'll go open the door and just load it in my trunk. And people were looking at me like, what do you mean the stuff? So, maybe it was taken that way. I just didn't have that social awareness that they were like, hey,
yeah.
But they definitely gave me, and I said, look, hey, there's this virus, and this is what I do, and I don't mean to offend you guys, and they were cool about it, but they definitely had that look on their face, like,
what's this guy up to?
They were
exactly.
Cool about it, but they were like, wow, who are these weirdos?
There were other members that have had like health issues that have been at the shop, wearing a full respirator and whatnot, and it's fine. Yes, you do what you need to do, and but this is like well before even the pandemic was a thing. So
yeah, this was a good 3 months before, and I picked it up through some of the custom authoritative source of truth development I had done, plus a few tips to where to point it. And so it was kind of like advanced knowledge of what was going on.
Yeah. So I definitely want to get into the like that source of truth stuff in a little bit if we can.
Sure.
But I wanted to go back and kind of touch on something that you said earlier, about the normalcy of how things are now. So you said you had gone through your entire emergency plan, but your emergency plan didn't go this far.
Yeah.
So I guess question number one is, why was there a cutoff? Like, why put an expiration date on an emergency?
Well, an emergency by definition is something that is out of the ordinary. And if you do that for a year, that's a pretty long time. That's, like a second in a minute, so to speak. If you're, overweight like me, you might die at 60. So, when you're thinking about it going, well, that's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And an emergency really shouldn't last a year. I mean, you could have a long emergency, but that's a cultural change.
Right.
So you have to, from a planning perspective, you got to put an end on things. You got to reach a conclusion. You have to be a way to leave the plan, because it's not a normal way to live. That, okay, well, I'm going to have a staging area in my home. I'm going to wear gloves and masks, and I'm not going to let my wife leave the house for 6 months or a year. All these things that we would consider normal today. You just don't do that. And
now you're definitely not saying that, after this much time, forget the masks, we're going to go out and lick doorknobs. You're not saying that at all.
Oh, I've been wanting to, but
but no, right? Okay.
No, my fetishes shouldn't be here.
Let's all get together for a freaking Christmas party.
It's a safe space.
Yeah, that's right. Here, let me clean your doorknobs.
If you think I'm not going to cut that out for a bumper,
no, leave it in.
Oh no! I'll put it into the bumper. That's what I'm saying.
That'll be great. So, sorry, I distracted myself and I lost my train of thought.
That was all my fault. I'm sorry. We were talking about the emergency needs an expiration date.
Yeah, you need one, because anytime you have a plan, you have to have an objective, and the objective is to survive. And in my personal case, I have a lot of compassion for my peers, for my friends, for my family.
Right.
You gotta go back to really living a normal life. You can't constantly live in a state of emergency, even though if you look culturally, we've kind of lived in a state of emergency since 9/11. And, this cultural driven fear, it's the terrorists, it's the economic crisis. It's almost like we live from emergency to emergency, and kind of promoted this cultural fear, which has really kind of resulted in what you've seen in the last, come to the head over the last couple months. You can't live like that as a human being. You can't live in fear constantly. So you have to have an end to the plan. And also it's a resource question.
But when you say an end to the plan, though, you don't mean go back to how things were before. You mean a new normal, right?
Yeah, we're not quite there yet, because we're still kind of in this netherworld between where we're going to be and where we are.
Right.
So at this point, after 365 days, I said, okay, the epidemic disaster plan has been completed. We now just have to accept that this is the way it is. This is, even though these are things that were disasters before, it's just the way it is. So let's go ahead and accept this change mentally and adjust how we live, adjust our expectations. And then as things evolve, we'll go ahead and change it. So perhaps another epidemic will come in the future. We can then recycle it and we'll know what to do. We've got a year's worth of experience of doing it. Really cool. But you have to have an end. Otherwise, it's not a plan. It's not a disaster plan. It's a life plan. And this is a terrible life plan, though I kind of like parts of it.
Yeah, yeah. So instead of it, so basically, I think what it sounds like you're saying is, instead of, okay, we're just, forget it, I'm tired of this, let's just go back to normal. We are readjusting what normal is. Like, it's just the way things are now, that I need to leave groceries in the garage for a couple, for a week or however long, 24 hours or whatever.
Well, in my case, we actually have we've set up a really nice staging area. We set it up right away as soon as the plan went.
Yeah.
but it's really become pretty nice. We do anybody who shows up to our house, and if we order something, after they leave, we mask up, we have it taped off in the garage. This is the staging area, and it's on the edge, and we have a refrigerator out there now, so we get everything delivered, our groceries, our consumables, whatever, and we stage it. And I actually have a barcoding system out there where I go ahead and tag everything coming in. I inventory it so I know that it's going to expire. I have a temperature sensor in the actual refrigerator, so I can say, hey, track temperature over time, because keeping a refrigerator out in your garage during the summer in Las Vegas can be kind of expensive. So and if you have a power failure, I've got the backup stuff because I've got other DR plants that I've staffed up. But it's really exercised a lot of, but it's changed how I think about things, and that I can order it and it can be here tomorrow, but I'm not going to see it for a week.
Right.
And having that buffer to allow the virus to become inactive or eventually die, or not be, where I can get it. We also disinfect a lot of stuff and still handle everything with gloves, and it's just become second nature now.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason I wanted to make sure I pointed that out, and this is not at all what I thought you were doing, but there's a tendency that I see us having of, we want the trappings of a thing without doing the thing. Yes. Right. In other words, like, if I do all of my homework, I get to have a pizza party. Okay, well, I did most of my homework. I'll do the rest of it later. I'm going to eat some pizza. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, we count our chickens before they're even eggs. Like,
it's almost like, I thought about that for a while, and I said, let me see. And when I realized it's a survival mechanism. Yeah. That, for example, where people are generally attracted to sweet things, even though they may be a diabetic or they may be overweight, they like sweet things. But that's because those people who made that choice to eat the sweet things had got more calories and probably survived starvation. Same thing happens here, is that though we put on the trappings of it from a logical perspective, the question comes up, well, I had that pizza party, and maybe I didn't pass my homework and didn't do as good, but I had more food, so I lived through that event. I had a little more energy. I met somebody, or whatever that particular benefit is. So it's almost like a survival trait. Yeah. And I don't know if that, I see a lot of people who kind of put on airs. They like, especially in a disaster side, you see the folks who go by the camo, and they get all the guns, and they have the big truck with the 4 wheels, and all those things that make them highly visible. I'm a prepper. I'm a disaster guy. I'm a militia guy. Whatever their thing is, and they put the trappings on. But in reality, it's like they don't do the real work, which is the cardio. Double tap. Zombieland stuff. They don't spend the time to actually change the way they live, or purchase stuff that's just normal that you would need for a survival situation. Like, how many people really think about doing laundry when they're in that type of environment? Not many. Yeah. Matter of fact, it's really difficult to find something that would allow you to do laundry over a long period of time when you're in these, trappings of survivalism. Because people don't think about, hey, where I'm going to take a crap? What am I going to, they'll think about the cool freeze-dried food, but they don't think about the impact of it. Yeah. The literal impact as in constipation. Oh. So there's all these impacts that you have, the errors of survivalism when you actually live it. Yeah. Sleeping under that Mylar blanket, from experience, it's something you want to really have to do. Yeah. It's like, you have, I'm trying to think of how to say this without advocating for one thing or another. Do it. Just do it. If you've got if you have a situation where you're like, I wish there weren't as many homeless people around here, but you have no desire whatsoever to help, fund programs that result in there being less homeless people. Yes. Or homeless pizza, for that matter. Yeah. My brain crossed the signals there. Not the one on the roof, like Breaking Bad? There you go. No, in chat they were saying, but pizza.
And Crux said, I do like pizza. But yeah, they want the trappings of the thing without actually having the thing. And a lot of times if someone really wants the thing to persist, they'll give you the trappings of the thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can say, those are all political things.
We're inherently social creatures.
Yeah.
And we put on I like to call them airs rather than trapping. We put on airs.
Yeah.
That we're compassionate, but yet we aren't willing to fund
Right.
or do things that show our compassion.
Yeah.
We are very accepting of new people, but yet don't come to my church, or hey, we don't need your type, or why don't you go back to where you came from? And these types of verbiages come out of. So they're putting on airs that, hey, I am so good. They're actually trying to influence their own social group,
right,
in order to have the social pecking order.
Yeah.
But in fact, their actions are hypocritical, and they can't perceive that.
Right.
So absolutely, that having that is a challenge in this environment.
Yeah, there's somebody that I work with that was saying, oh, I'm very careful. I'm with this thing. It's very serious and blah blah blah. And then like a month or two later, I heard this person say, yeah, I'm gonna go off and to a Christmas thing. I'm gonna go see my mom for Christmas, like I do every year. I'm like, you're freaking nuts.
That doesn't sound careful.
That doesn't sound careful at all. You're just gonna drive across this state and go visit someone else who's elderly. Way to go.
Yeah, hey, spread the virus, man. Good job. But you know, and you have to question that. You really do. You have to question that people, are they doing it for the purposes of protecting their loved ones, being compassionate to other people, making good choices under pressure, or are they doing it to receive the social strokes to enhance their peer group perception? And I would say that most people are more concerned about what their peers think of them than actually doing the right thing.
I mean, honestly, and maybe I don't know if I'm being too charitable or not charitable enough. I kind of get it in that you still shouldn't, but I don't. It's one of those things where you don't condone it, but you can understand it. And it's like, I get it. Some people are very lonely. I get it. You know what I mean? And some people cannot handle being away from their social group. Absolutely. I get it. You still shouldn't, but I get it. Anyhow, so there's a lot of things like, the don't go cross country to visit your damn family, but that people are doing, in order to rationalize, and then there's the whole mask thing. I don't even want to go down that road, but have you seen any other things over the past year that have become the new normal?
I would say that people's willingness to accept, in general, there's a portion of the population that doesn't, but willingness to accept centralized direction is much more prevalent here in the States than it's been in the past. Other cultures, Chinese-based cultures, for example, Confucius-based cultures, ones that are based on dharma and karma, those from Southeast Asia, are much more accepting of that type of top-down hierarchical control. Here in the States, some of the things that people have agreed to do for whatever reason in the 80s would have never been accepted, but in the 60s would have been very accepted in the 50s. And it's really it's a sliding scale that the perception of freedom, the perception of, how much you want to contribute to society has changed over time. So I say the biggest thing is that you've seen a slip of people more towards the 1950s from the sense of community. Yeah. That willingness to comply with, the old Conrad drills where you'd get, duck and cover, that type of thing. Though you see a comparable type of thing with social distancing in schools, a social distance, willingness to stay away. You wouldn't have seen in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So that's probably the only real thing that I've seen that's different, is that level of acceptance or level of rejection is as we've become a much more polarized society over the last year than we were in the past.
So why do you think that is? Like, why do you think it's become, well, that's going down the whole, I guess just to kind of dip our toe in a little bit.
Yeah.
As a snack. Uh,
Just snack on a toe? Yuck.
no. The why do you think it is that something so simple as just, this is an airborne thing, having a thing on your face protects you from that thing. What, I'll put it this way. Why is protective gear so looked down on? Football players wear football helmets. Hockey players goalies wear face shields. You're going in public. If you're on a work site, you gotta wear steel-toed boots. If you're in your car, you gotta wear a seatbelt. Like why has it become such a thing? And and I guess really speaking, instead of the politics end of things, what human emotion causes that? What is that?
Well, the one thing that's changed recently within the last 10, 15 years is that the cultural peer pressure has kind of gone away. Where in the 60s you would tune in, and the 70s you would tune into, CBS News, Walter Cronkite was the voice that you would turn to, or Dan Rather in the 80s,
Right.
in the 90s. There was a cultural enforcement. One of the things that Stalin had said about the United States is that they could never really overtake the United States because of their moral fabric, their religion, their strength of religion, and their public community spirit. That if you could destroy one of those things, you would be able to turn the United States to a communist country. And so there's a really good quote on it. I wish I had it. And I'm just saying from a social perspective that the United States' culture has been broken down into smaller and smaller units, primarily because of economics, of driving up consumption. So the nuclear family, which was actually a much smaller traditional family, is a 3-generation family where you have the grandparents, the parents, and the kids all living in the same home.
Oh.
And so in the United States, that was less prevalent. But in other cultures, Southeast Asia, Southwest Asia, Europe to an extent, Africa definitely, these traditional societies still have the grandparents, the parents, the kids, and even grandkids living in the same household. In the 1950s, you saw a breakdown of that. After the war, the commercial entities who were selling things wanted to have more households set up. So they really sold this concept of a nuclear family of parents and kids in order to drive the housing market, to drive the consumption, because they had all this excess capacity left over from the war that they needed to put to use. So as time has gone on from the 50s and the 60s into the 70s and 80s, that nuclear family became broken, where you had a lot of single households, where you had a parent and children, which increased the number of households, increased the consumption because you couldn't have that efficiencies. And then as you move forward into the 2010 period, it became individuals that pretty much people lived by themselves. So once again, you had another household. And from an economics perspective, they drove that way in order to improve the growth. Because, there's only so many households. You only need so many sets of plates and cars and stuff like that.
Right.
So at the same time, they broke down that community peer pressure component, where, and a good example for those of you who play World of Warcraft, in World of Warcraft, in the classic version, you couldn't just form groups dynamically. You had to know somebody to go to Blackwing Lair and you needed to know 40 people, and you got a reputation for, hey, this guy's a jerk. He steals loot. He's a ninja, ninja looter. Don't bring him. Well, when World of Warcraft evolved and they allowed you to have dynamic groups, your reputation didn't count. And today's reputation, your reputation as a person, your family's reputation, has a lot less value than it did in the 80s or the 50s, where you could be embarrassed because you were having an affair. Now it's cool, hey, put it on Instagram. So that breakdown, that social dynamic breakdown, has made us much more vulnerable to manipulation. So you have all these entities, these power entities out there, whether they be economic, social, or political, who now have basically captive audiences, and they're fed certain sets of information in order to have them act in a certain way. And the reason I say that is that when I did my master's degree, I finished that last year. I talked about it briefly on the stream. I was using semantic analysis to analyze social media posts in order to predict the stock market. And what I found and can have statistically relevant results is that there's ongoing manipulation. You've seen examples of that, like Cambridge Analytica, I think it was called, who helped the Trump get elected. That was straight out manipulation. So you see a lot of groups being manipulated for whatever reason, and they're not being controlled by the social fabric that they used to be here. So you have people who have very limited viewpoints. They're being driven by entities other than ones that have their own best needs in mind. They're actually, hey, let's make everybody go buy this certain stock, diamond hands. These are manipulations in order to achieve an economic end.
Yeah.
And I'm taking no politics here. We're just talking about behavior.
Right.
So when something like a mask question comes up and it benefits an entity, whether it be a non-governmental actor, a political party, to have people take risky behaviors that from a strictly rational perspective would be okay, and makes it bad, socially bad. And since people are very concerned about putting on the airs or the trappings that you brought up and getting the social strokes because they don't have that larger family unit to reinforce it in the larger cultural portion like you'd see in China or in India or in the Arab countries. People, because they are so desperate for that acceptance, they adopt it and they have nothing to refute it because they've become isolated into little information spheres.
So speaking of being divided into spheres, which is one of my more clunky segues, but we're gonna go for it anyway. We have arrived at the division between the first half of the show and the last half of the show, and I just wanted to do a quick reminder. We're talking here with Muffins, and he is one of the first people at the shop that saw this stuff coming. So we wanted to kind of talk with him and just basically see how things have gone over the past year. Real quick, I did want to take a quick second to tell you that this is on behalf of the SYN Shop. The SYN Shop is a maker hackerspace located in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we've got the tools and materials for anything you'd like to make. So head on over to synshop.org. You can see it right down there, all the way at the bottom of the screen, and check out the shop. And if you'd like any kind of snazzy shirts, you just type !merch in the chat, and you can get one of those there. All right. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube, welcome to Saturday. But you've only got about a half hour left of this show. If you're watching us on Twitch, you got a whole another hour and a half. We're gonna have a post game that's strictly for the Twitch, the people that are watching us on Twitch. So if you're on Twitch, stay right here. If you're on YouTube, enjoy the last half hour while you can. All right. So speaking of enjoying things while you can, another thing that we were talking about was indicators on the last show. So basically, like the kind of clues that tip you off to what kind of situation you're in. In other words, like I think you gave this example if I remember right. But basically, how a frog would know whether or not it's in a pot of boiling water. Essentially, like, is the water around me boiling?
Yeah.
So
does it be warm?
Is it really warm? Yeah, exactly. So let's see. So could you give like a quick recap of that? Like, what were some of the things that tipped you off and said, "Hey, wait a minute, this is not a flu"?
Well, I have some family connections in China, mainland China, and so on my wife's side of the family, and so we keep appraised of what's happening in China because hey, that's where my family is. So, and I care about my family, so I pay more attention to that sort of stuff. And we had heard as the new year came up, the lunar new year, about some, flu.
The lunar New Year is when? When is that?
Back then, I think it was, what was it, 21st? I have to remember. It's basically, this year it's next week, but last year I had to forget. I'll have to go look it up. I just don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, but before Christmas or after Christmas?
It was after Christmas, after the Julian calendar New Year, which is of course the 1st of January. It was it usually falls between the third week of January and like the last week of February. So it moves around because the moon moves around. Yeah. So 28 versus moons. So we had heard about folks who were dying, and we were seeing on things like WeChat, which is the social media equivalent of Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, basically, lots of videos, lots of questions. We were seeing videos of people walking down the street and literally dropping dead from COVID, or people who were standing on platforms and just going head first right into the train track, just dropping.
Like no warning or anything.
Right. And which is a symptom of COVID. We don't see it here because people, they go to bed when they're sick here in the States, but in China, you have certain social obligations. So if you had to go to work, you don't stay home sick, you would go. And if you had that, all that fluid in your lungs, and you would literally, fall down. And
so the people knew that they were sick.
They just went because they had to go for, I got to feed my family. I got to go. There's a lot of social pressure to work in China.
Okay.
So, but also we were reading about cases in Washington, and we heard from the community down in San Gabriel Valley, where there's a lot of Chinese, of a lot of people getting sick. And we saw people when I went to CES, and I went down to the Chinese pavilion because I love going to all the pavilions when, I'm at CES. That's so cool. But there was a lot of people just kind of like laying down in the booths. It was very unusual. I remember saying, gosh, they must be really tired from flying in from China, because most of them fly in the day before and they're still on Chinese time. So I'm thinking, here it is, normalcy bias going on. I was looking at them thinking, wow, they must be really tired. They're laying down, they're sitting down.
Yeah.
And so it became very apparent that in retrospect, that they actually had the flu. They had COVID. They brought it from Wuhan to the Chinese pavilion in CES.
It's a miracle I didn't get it. I was at CES for like 3 days.
Oh, yeah. Or you may have got it and you just don't know.
Well, I mean, yeah, that is possible. I was sick as a dog most of, most of late January, early February. Well, that checks out.
Right on the top. And so you may have already had it and you don't even know it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Just a quick thank you for the follow, Adam's Apple Live. We appreciate that. Awesome. So so after you saw that, at what point was it to say, hey, this is a problem?
Well, I always keep my disaster plans, and I realized that, hey, something's going on here that's different. It's not, maybe it's SARS, maybe it's MERS. Let me pull out the disaster plan and we'll take a look at this rationally.
Okay.
So I pulled out the epidemic disaster plan and I said, okay, mysterious disease, people dying. There is reports of it spreading and it's unusual. People are being hospitalized. Okay. And then, frankly, I got a call from a friend from when I used to do counterinsurgency, counterintelligence work, who said, hey, John, you might want to point some of your really cool open source it's open source tool called Open Semantic Search at what they call SAM. SAM is the government contracting database. And I said, okay, I'll do that. So I went ahead and just let it go wild against SAM. They have a nice API. You can pull out all the contracts being awarded. We found 2 contracts that got awarded with a 7-day turnaround, which has not happened since right after 9/11, when they were trying to, respond to it, and it didn't happen again until the war in 2003. They were trying to get immediate needs, and so they had 7-day turnaround contracts specifically to open up a data center disaster location that had a lot of it had a cluster for biological processing. That they did that to staff that up in Atlanta for the department or the national health guys.
Yeah.
And so they did that. The other one was a continuity of government. And I hadn't seen a continuity of government 7-day turnaround since, back on 9/11.
Huh.
The shadow government that they talk about. Well, they issued a contract in the first 2 weeks of January, and that was hidden. It had a 7-day turnaround, and it had an expiration day time of 8 days.
I've seen the documents, folks. It's the deep state all over again.
I wish I had been more cognizant of the time, because I would have taken, copies of it. But I was just like, I didn't know what it was. I just said, that's really weird.
Right.
And so I went back and I looked at, because I had been doing a lot of work in the authoritative source of truth, where you're constantly looking at authoritative sources of information.
Yeah.
And with that tip, plus the social media information coming from China, plus the news reports about people starting to get sick, and then the continuity of government and a disaster recovery site being activated in Atlanta, it was like, oh, that meets the criteria. We're going to execute this right now. And my wife, it was like, yep, let's do it.
So the disaster plan thing, I've like at first was a little bit like, oh, okay. Like, do you individually bag every piece of trash that you make too? Like, but so like, don't tell them that.
That's right. Don't tell my barcode my utensils.
So, but the more I hear about it, the more I'm like, okay, I get it, because it takes the human element out of, am I in a disaster? Like going back to the frog analogy, right? You're able to look at it completely objectively, separate yourself completely from it, and say, okay, based on these facts, yeah, there's a problem.
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with normalcy bias, as we've discussed previously before.
Right.
But also that people, when they get put under stress, they lose a lot of their cognitive abilities.
Yeah.
That the lower brain becomes more dominant. The upper brain gets distracted. So you can see examples of this. The last time I used the concept of the tidal wave in Thailand, where people didn't realize there was, and when they saw the tidal wave coming towards them, they kind of like, oh, that's interesting, but they didn't react to it. Same with fire. And in the military, a lot of young recruits, when they go out and practice, ambushes and stuff, you can see the young ones who have not actually figured it out yet. They literally will panic, and they'll take their rounds, and they'll start shaking. They'll forget how to load their rifle. When they do, they'll forget, hey, don't go on full automatic and spray. That's not going to help you. You're going to be out of ammo. You'd be out of ammo in like 7 seconds.
No spraying and praying.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's not an effective strategy there.
Not really.
No, you might scare them
it is
away.
if you yell suppressing fire at the same time.
That is true. Or final protective fire. But usually you're not yelling that. You're just not even realizing what's going on. So people, they lose their cognitive abilities, or they get involved and they minimize obvious signals.
Yeah.
That, hey, people are dying from this and they don't know why.
If anybody wants to check out the episode that we just referenced a second ago, I just threw a link to it up in the chat. So if you guys want to see episode 17 and marvel at how many audio errors we had. But
just skip the middle 20 minutes.
Yeah, skip the middle 20 minutes. He's right. Yeah. But you'll know when you get there. But at any rate, that's the episode that he was talking about that we had him on the first time. If you guys want to see it. But at any rate, so these people would go into situations like that. Oh, that reminds me. Penn Jillette had a saying that on one of his he had a show on Showtime a long time ago, or HBO, doesn't matter. I think it was Showtime. And he said that in times of crisis, everyone does what they always do, only more so.
Absolutely.
And that is kind of what I feel like is sort of what you're talking about here. Like if someone is someone that panics, they're going to panic more. If someone organizes, they're going to organize more. If they're a leader, they'll lead more. Like everyone does what they always do, only more so. So
yeah. I think that's a really good analogy. What I've seen, especially since a lot of the work I did overseas was in live firefights where we would be doing force protection to go out, defend the bases. Basically, we would roll into people's homes and neutralize potential insurgencies. That the people who hadn't done that really didn't know how to react. And when they did, they generally would be doing something that was not productive, but they could handle. So like, okay, I'm going to sit here and I'm just going to sit here. I'm not going to do anything else. Or they think, where's my phone? Where's my phone? I got to let people know what's going on. Where is my phone? I can't find my phone. And it would literally be right in front of them because cognitively they did not see the phone, even though it was literally right there in front of them. And anybody else looking at them saying, hey, crazy, it's right there, So that you lose the higher functions. And so the purpose of the disaster plan is when you do have your higher function, your cognitive ability to make a rational decision, you can think through the scenario and have a checklist or a guideline of what you need to do in that thing. So if you are being sued, I have a checklist for being sued. What do? You call this lawyer, blah, blah, blah. Hey, I'm divorced. So
fair enough.
It happens. But having that checklist of what to do and having thought through the ramifications alleviates you from the problem. You can focus on, okay, I'm going to follow the disaster plan. And that's, effectively for the pandemic, that's exactly what I did. And I was able to see trends and problems. Like if you recall in March, April, it was hard to get certain types of food. There were shortages. So those types of things. Fireworks, yes. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Locally, there was fireworks, and I'm thinking, okay, was that a rifle shot? No, that was a firework. Okay.
do you have a book for that? Like hearing gunfire? Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I do. Here, let me go get it. No.
So you also mentioned, I want to make sure that we get to this at least touch on this in the main show. We might have to go more in depth in the post game.
Sure.
But you mentioned on the last show that some stuff that I don't know if you could go into full detail on exactly.
Not back then. I can.
Well, all right. So your authoritative source of truth.
Yes.
So hit me. What is it? What is an authoritative source of truth?
Well, an authoritative source of truth is is an entity such as a person or a government body or a system that applies expert judgment and rules to claim that an artifact or a piece of information is valid and originates from an original source or a legitimate source. So, for example, if I have a social media posting, that's generally not an authoritative source unless the person who posted it is, let's say it's Beyonce, and she's posting about, hey, this is my new album coming out, and here is a link. That becomes a way to determine that is an authoritative source of truth for Beyonce's album as herself posting on Twitter.
I thought you meant just like trust Beyonce for everything. Like,
no.
Like, wait, what?
You mean you don't?
I mean, maybe.
Yeah. Hey,
depends, I guess. I don't have any reason not to trust her, come to think of it, but all right.
Anyway, but no, authoritative source of truth is a concept that in COSI, which is the system engineering standards body, has come up with to say that, hey, this artifact, whether it be an engineering artifact, a CAD drawing, a requirement, is the one you should be using for what you're building. So it's like, okay, well, there's a lot of copies of schematics for Apple MacBook Pro motherboards out there. Which one is really the authoritative source, or which one is kind of like one that's a previous prototype? You don't know. You can't really tell from the schematic because they all think that, hey, this is the right information. But in truth, there should only be one authoritative source of the schematics for the MacBook Pro.
Okay.
So you, as an engineer, would want to pull the authoritative source information. Now you might say, well, John, that's pretty a generic thing. Well, yeah, but it's difficult in digital engineering where things change constantly to figure this out. The work I was doing at that time was the machine learning to determine if a particular information was authoritative. In other words, it was legitimate and it was valid, and that it was something that actually reflected what reality was. So as you know, there's a lot of disinformation on social media. And so that was our training group. I know, isn't
You
that
really
amazing?
think that people would just go on the internet and tell lies?
It's, the social fabric, man.
I don't. Okay,
So
so
the authoritative source of truth work I was doing was looking at doing semantic analysis against postings and social media and making a determination which of those postings was authoritative, that it could be tracked back to a person, a governing body, or a system that was able to say that, yes, this information is valid. So basically solving the fake news problem. And
So-
that was...
So how did it do that? Did it create like an overlay, say, okay, I trust these people here and these people over here, and that information is being reported by both of them? Is it something?
That was part of it, yeah. So we had a whole graph database that would be set up, identifying the individuals who were making these proclamations. If you've ever seen the Panama Papers, and they had a really great presentation at DEF CON about this. Panama Papers were a release from a legal firm of a lot of hidden companies and funds and money hidden all over the world. But it was extremely complicated and convoluted. So they used a graph database to show the relationship so they could follow the money back to the people who were hiding it, where they were hiding it. It was a really nice set of work. Well, what I did on the social media side is that I found all the bots and people, plugged them into the graph, and made it a graph problem rather than making it trying to figure out who is this person and what and then use the relationships based on the postings of who replied to the postings, who this person was on the internet, using competitive intelligence techniques to flesh out each node on the graph to figure out who they were and what they were, and then and what they were actually saying, reflecting other sources out there, such as news sources, AP, Reuters, government databases like SAMS, which has all the contracts in it, and assigning a specific value to that. And that value was derived either through semantic analysis of the actual content or the relational analysis or the graph analysis to determine which one of these people who posted on Twitter about this general concept was the one that was the closest to being right or correct.
So it sounds to me like what you did is essentially give someone like the equivalent of a credit score, right? Based on past performance. They said it was going to rain on Tuesday and it rained a little on Tuesday, so we'll give them a 5. They said it was going to be a downpour on Thursday and there was a downpour on Thursday, so we'll give them 9. Or, so something like that. I mean, it's totally oversimplified.
In basic sense, yes, but it wasn't what they said. It was the number of people they influenced.
So if they influence people more, they're more reliable?
Not necessarily. So it was a combination. So some of it was, hey, this person puts out good information. And then who do they influence out there in the graph? They're what they call first order, second order, and third order effects. So when somebody makes a pronouncement about Beyonce's album being Beyonce, all her followers are her first order people. They would also post about it and they would share it out to their friends. And so they became second order people on that particular subject.
Okay.
And you could determine from that who her promoters were, because they would have people who were out there, bots and advertisers, who are making posts about this in order to promote it. And those people would go up in the score so you could determine who the backers were. This is a concept that is used in counterinsurgency.
Sure.
In counterinsurgency, a terrorist doesn't really, and when I say terrorist, I could be freedom fighter. You insert your appropriate word based on your own political side.
Right.
But this person has a support system. Somebody's feeding them, somebody's getting them money, someone's getting them intelligence. All of that leaves message traffic. Then beyond that, those people who are providing those support have their families. So one of the use cases that I worked on in the mid 2000s is that there was a lot of grandmothers in Romania who were buying homes and Mercedes. And it didn't make sense from a financial transaction standpoint.
Wait, so how were you able to look up Romanian mothers buying homes in Mercedes? What database is that?
The SWIFT system is an amazing thing. And the records that you leave in the financial system, intentional or not, are public knowledge, basically.
Right, yeah.
So anytime that there's money transferred, especially large sums, it's all tracked.
Yeah.
And it's documented. And there's services like Firehose from Twitter, but there's other services on the financial side that sell this and transact in this type of information. So when you buy a home, you get all these advertisements for Home Shield and come and do my patio and repaint my house. Well, that's coming out of those types of transactions. So it becomes very obvious. But in that particular use case, Romanian grandmothers were buying homes because their grandchildren were the hackers who were assisting on the Bitcoin transfers of funding Al Qaeda as it went ahead in its transactions in Iraq.
Wow.
So that's called the second or third and fourth area effects of a particular, and this is all counterintelligence type of work. You take that theory, which is pretty easy to see that works in practice, and then you apply that to determine who's the authoritative source. In other words, I'm not trying to find who the supporters are so I can drone strike them. I want to find out who the supporters are so I can then determine why they're doing something and why that this particular posting about somebody who died in San Gabriel Valley in January on Chinese social media, like WeChat, was an authoritative indicator that there is a pandemic going on. When I put it in relationship to the postings on SAMS, the news articles, they had this big festival in Wuhan at the same time where they were trying to prove how safe things by having a gigantic communal dinner. And it had almost 30,000 people who came and ate out of the same pots.
Oh, good.
And about 3 weeks later is when you had this big explosion in Wuhan because of that normalcy bias of the mayor saying, oh, well, there's no, look, we'll prove there is no pandemic. We're going to have a great big open feast and everybody there. So it was the combination of these that raised the score of the validity of that post of that WeChat of somebody in the San Gabriel Valley who was posting about getting sick and said, hey, this is probably a pandemic. We need to execute our disaster plan.
Wow.
So the authoritative source of truth work was really about making associations in a way that helped people cut through the BS. And that's what graph databases are great at. They're designed to do this, that you can go and take the graph database and determine relationships that are non-intuitive.
So when you say the graph database, so just we only got a few minutes left. I want to make sure I leave the YouTube people with something that they can take with them there. When you say the graph database, how does one start finding out information about that, how to use it? Is this something that I can just go download or how does?
It's free, actually. There's a lot of graph databases nowadays. Neo4j is the one that's the easiest entry. It's the starter drug in graph databases.
Neofor?
NEOF. I'm sorry, 4J.
JAY or just J?
J. Yeah.
Just the J. Okay.
Yeah.
Neo, the number 4, J.
Right.
Okay.
That's the product. If you look up Panama Papers on the internet, you can find a really good set of stories that were published in 2015 about how they used the graph database Neo4j and the Curious, which is Link Curious, which is a visualization tool for graph databases to track down people's hiding their money all over the world in different secret Swiss bank accounts and through shell corporations in the Bahamas and such. So really fabulous stuff out there. There's also a DEF CON presentation on this that's worth watching from, I guess that would be DEF CON 22 maybe. It was 2015, whatever that was.
Wow.
Maybe it was like DEF CON 2000. Anyway, there's good presentations on graph databases that will help you understand it. The authoritative source of truth, you can get that from Incosi, INCOSE.org, I think it is. Just do Incosi, authoritative source of truth, and you'll find something out at the OMG working group or the object management group. They have a Wikipedia entry on it, and OMG is the people who designed HTTP. They're the standards holders. W3C is part of OMG.
Okay.
So they're standard holders out there, and you can find all this documented. Not in the context I'm talking about, because I was using that to train the AI components.
Yeah.
But the concepts were used to actually allow us to make that determination.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I want to get into a little bit more of that in the post game here, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Well, again, we've been talking with Muffins lots of really cool information. If you are if you're watching us right now on Twitch, you're in luck. If you liked what you saw the first hour, got a whole nother hour coming at you here. We're gonna take a quick little break, grab a couple drinks, and come back and do a whole nother hour for you. We're gonna talk about all kinds of stuff. We're gonna get our brains really smooth. I might even talk. I might even do the Alex Jones impression again. I'm not sure. I try to keep it to once per episode. I don't want to do that, every show. Okay. Anyway,
post game count as another episode. Yeah.
I guess so. I guess it does. I guess it does. All right. So if you're watching us on YouTube, welcome to Saturday. But unfortunately, this is the end of the line for you if you're watching us on YouTube. In just a few short moments, you're going to see me telling you what you are about to miss. So here I am. Nope. Here I am. There we go. Hi, I'm the Mighty Pong, host of the show that you just got done watching. Hey, if you'd like to see the entire show and not just the first hour, make sure that you watch on twitch.tv/Synshop every Friday night for the main show. And on Monday nights, we have our special project night. So you can join us, build something, and basically throw stuff at us while we try to concentrate on things. So join us over there, twitch.tv/Synshop. I am, of course, the Mighty Pong, and we will see you there. One take. Not one take.